Drew Gill. Drew Gill, in my opinion, he's like the professor. He just breaks down everything. He's very analytical. He's got that mindset of there's a reason for everything. And you certainly see it in this seminar. I was fortunate enough to attend the ABFA, which is the American Bass Fishing Alliance annual regional high school bass fishing conference held at Vianney High School in St. Louis. It's something that happens every year in the first part of December, and it's set up to give back to the youth. It's a high school event, so you're going to have a lot of high school anglers, and they have several touring pros that come and give seminars. It's a classroom. It's basically just like a high school or college seminar. You're in a classroom environment. It's very small. It's very intimate. You get to ask questions. There's a lot of social media that's going to be coming up towards the end of the year. So if you're interested in that, very, very reasonably priced, especially for the amount of information that's given out. They have a lot of giveaways, a lot of raffles. It's a no-brainer. If you've got somebody in your family or you know somebody that's of high school age and fishing in tournament scenarios with a bass fishing club, or if you're just interested in going, if you're a coach or you're a parent, definitely consider attending that next year. I was able to check out several of the seminars. So this is another one with Drew Gill, the bass professor. I mean, he just breaks it down. I got to sit in. This is a little bit shorter. I kind of came in the middle of it, but you can definitely get an idea of how he breaks down. I think one of the topics that he highlights is a point. You know, how do you break down a point? How do you choose the baits to fish it? Your boat positioning, which is huge. What kind of cover is on that point? He just kind of gets into the nitty gritty of how he approaches a point and attacks a point. So Drew Gill, St. Louis Bass Fishing Conference.
Hanging above it like a boat dock. This right here is just a contour, but it's the contour they live on. You know, it's the same situation as you went to your home lake in the last weekend of May. You went out there, you caught 18 pounds off one point, and come back the next week and you catch 15 pounds off. Those fish are not just like, you didn't just happen to come across that point as a school of fish was roaming by and they just swam off into nowhere. Those are residential bass that live on that point. So even though they're not on a brush pile, they're not on a floating dock, they are sitting on that point and treating it just like it's a physical object or just like it's a piece of cover, even though it's not. So anybody give me a good suggestion for what you should throw at the end of a point when you're trying to catch a fish in a very narrow zone? Drop shot. Drop shot. Gosh, these people freaking love it. Drop shot. Okay. Crankbait can be a good option if we're covering some water. We're covering a distance ledge, like a ledge where we're trying to cover a large span of it. In this scenario, I'm kind of focusing on using the bait to generate a bite in a narrow zone. Think like narrow zone. So jerkbait, great option. Gosh, they're on it. Jerkbait. Everybody's getting a feel for it. Okay, drop shot, jerkbait. Carolina rig, great option. And it is different enough from a drop shot that I will call it something different. So, again, very different techniques, but what does a drop shot, Carolina rig, and jerkbait all have in common? Multiple stops. You have the ability to stop it with no harsh consequences and give that bass multiple opportunities to eat. Drop shot, you're gonna have that initial fall. Whenever that bait actually gets to the bass and he gets on it, and whenever it happens to be that fish is really tight to it and that bait moves, it's another opportunity. That second time that bait lifts and falls, after he's already gotten on it, if he didn't see it the first time, it's opportunity number 3. And then when you lift it a final time to take it away from whatever that target is probably your 4th opportunity in that cast, generally speaking. Jerkbait, you're going to kind of generate as many opportunities as you want to move it, however small you want those increments to be. Carolina rig, it's just going to kind of depend on current or lack thereof. And you know, that one's kind of a wild card. You know, with Carolina rig, you're probably going to generate a few good opportunities for them to eat it. But due to the freedom of that bait, the freedom of that weight, you don't necessarily know where in this span those opportunities are going to come after that initial fall. Once you're down there, kind of all bets are off, which is one of the greatest things about the Carolina rig, is that it's so free to do silly stuff down there. You know, the bottom is kind of going to determine for you how that bait acts. So all great options, working with that little zone on the end of that point. And even though there's not a physical object there, they choose to live there. That's their residence. They're going to stay in that little zone. And you're going to be able to appeal to them multiple times in that little space with one of those techniques. It's you know, although a jig, shaky and jerk bait, spoon, glide bait, fluke, wacky worm, you know, drop shot, Carolina rig, although there's a lot of differences in all those techniques, there's a lot of similarities. And that's because the purpose is the same. We are trying to determine when to use what techniques based on purpose, not based on you know, what a bait is like, what we think it looks like, you know, all those factors are like, what does it look like in the water? Is it purple? Is it yellow? Whatever. That stuff does not matter nearly as much as purpose. What do we want the bait to be able to do? Do we want the bait to be able to generate a bite for us to where we can focus on other things like boat positioning, boat speed, or focusing on what kind of area we're in primarily? Or do we want a bait to be able to function in a scalpel-esque manner, meaning I am determining exactly what that bait does, exactly when it does it, and its ability to get a bass to bite or not bite. All these baits, the one thing they do have in common is a lot of your ability to catch fish is based on you. It's based on how you present that bait and where you present that bait. And it gives us a lot of power, which with that power, you know, comes great responsibility, as something was once said to Spider-Man. So you have that power, and how you choose to use it is up to you, which means you got to be really, you know, really intentional. So like with a brush pile, if I know there's fish on the other side of a pile, you know, let's say either I'm using scope and I can see them back there, or I fished this pile before, or I side scan it and I see them over on one side. Should I try to cast over the pile and get to those two fish that are on the bottom, 10 feet below the top of the pile? Or should I take that extra 30 seconds to hook around and hit them from the side where I can actually land that fish? 100%. Take that 30 seconds to set up right. Because I promise you, if you have a good opportunity to catch one, how long do you think, let's say this, brush fishing, how long do you think would be a fast amount of time to go out, effectively find a good pile that has fish on it, and make a cast? How long do you think that span of time probably takes you, realistically? Like, how often do you think you can repeat it? You just did it just a minute ago. How long do you think it's going to take until you get that next opportunity? 25 minutes. In that scenario, I think that's pretty accurate. 25 minutes maybe. How long does it take you to set up right to where you don't lose that fish? 30 seconds? So now it takes 25 minutes and 30 seconds, but I land that fish. If I lose that fish, now I'm 50 minutes in the hole by the time I get that next opportunity, if I land that next opportunity, you know? And so now it took me 50 minutes to generate one bite, even though I had two good chances. It took me 50 minutes to land that, you know, one bite, because the previous bite, I lost it because I was too sloppy and I didn't take the extra 30 seconds. Same thing with a boat dock. Why would I try and skip it to a place, you know, let's say I'm trying to skip it up, you know, under the lift from the side and climb it off the lift and spook them, when I can line it up good where I can skip it down the front and line up exactly where I want to cast it, because I have a few different lanes to hit it. It's common sense. Take the little bit of extra time it takes to make sure you do that cast right, because it's easier to take the time to do a good cast right than it is to generate a second opportunity. So same manner with a point. Don't get up on it. And when you're fishing a bait, so this is one that I like to play a little bit when I can. With this drop shot, this Carolina rig, okay? One thing you got to keep in mind when you're fishing for fish on the bottom, offshore, when you're casting over distance, is line drag, meaning getting your line through the fish. Line drag is kind of a poor way to put that, but pulling your line through the fish. They're a lot more aware of your line than you think they are, not seeing it, but feeling it. And there's a lot of times with the dragging bait where if you approach it from the wrong direction, you'll oftentimes end up getting that line in the fish or right around the fish, and they're going to be very much aware of your line before they're aware of the bait, and the jig's kind of up. Your bite percentage generally drops. Once they're aware of your line, you can see them kind of move around with it. Your bite percentage is going to drop 20-25%. So with these baits, drop shot, Carolina rig, I'm going to approach them from the outside in, generally speaking. You know, my first approach is going to be casting it from the deep angle and fishing it down to where my line stays at a little bit more of an up angle or up and away, because these fish are trending a little bit deeper as I fish my bait. You know, I'm fishing it deeper. Versus if I'm fishing from up here, on top of this point to the edge from the top, my line angle is a lot flatter to the bottom. I'm a lot more likely to drag it across those fish. So that's not an angle I'm going to take with a drop shot or Carolina. Jerk bait, glide bait, any bait that I can keep above their head, I'm going to approach it from the top side. Because from the top side with bait like a bait fish imitator, like a jerk bait or a glide bait, or in this scenario if it's shallow like a spook, they're going to use that little bit tighter band of water like they have up on top of the point to feed on this bait fish. Thank you. Because once that bait fish gets out in the middle of the lake, not that they can't feed on it, but a single bait fish chased out in the middle of the lake is a lot lower percentage opportunity than a single bait fish chased up on top of the point. So I'm going to try and fish the jerk bait in a little bit different manner because I can keep it up. But understanding the purpose of why we select what techniques we select and in what scenarios we use them is one of the biggest things in bass fishing. It's not about colors, sizes, shapes, weight. All those things matter. But what matters more than anything is that not just that we have the tools or have the tools rigged in a manner that's positive, it's that we know why we're using them to where we can repeat that success. So in this effectiveness part, we're talking this vertical zone that's squared off by how far they're willing to go from this target, and by the fact that they're willing to go up or down to eat depending on the scenario. And we're talking about residential fish. Those are two demarcating factors of which type of fish we're focusing on. These are just little buzzwords to try and help us understand what we should be leaning more towards in a scenario. Are they more residential? And are they using that vertical zone? Well, if so, we might want to lean a little bit more effectiveness driven. Are they more, roaming around, and are they less residential? Or are they using, more of that horizontal play, meaning they're chasing things over distance? Then maybe we want to go a little bit more efficiency based. Or we're, less confident in being around them. That's when we're going to lean a little bit more that direction. It's just a, it's a scale. You weigh what's more important to you in that scenario and on that fishery at that time, and determine from there what direction you need to go. If you need to go efficiency based, it's going to be more about using the environment to try and generate bites, and it's going to be about using the bait selection or how you fish it. If you go effectiveness driven, you're going to be a little bit more focused on how you fish, the technique you pick, and what technique you select. So it's a good guideline for going out and making good decisions on the water pretty fast and dialing in what direction you need to go with your techniques. It's one that I use on the water, and it's definitely how I approach most of my tournaments in terms of bait selection, and it's the framework that all tackle selections can be viewed through, where we can go out and make consistent, effective decisions in terms of our bait selection based on the situation that we're in. So that's my framework for it, and you got to remember with this effectiveness part too. All these hops, lifts, twitches, stops, whatever. How many of you in here, this might be a little bit before your time, but how many of you in here have watched the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse? Fire. You remember the mystery mouse Cthulhu? He could pull it out at any time and it'd bail him out only one time. All those stops, hops, lifts, those things, the first time we use it, that is our secret weapon, which means we have to choose to use it in the right manner, and we have to use it in the situation that calls for it, meaning a situation where we have the freedom to take the time to do that. But in those situations, it's an incredibly effective way to generate bites, because our ability to divert from that traditional action that bait has when they initially engage with it is our opportunity to continue to produce bites that potentially we wouldn't get otherwise and reproduce it. So that's kind of my approach to it. It's my approach personally that I've developed to bait selection and to my tackle buying and using. And any questions you guys might have in terms of this whole concept, I would love to hear them, because I love talking tackle.
I'm gonna set this up right here. questions?
I
think everybody's baffled right now.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. So how would you know if it's a residential fish or not?
Generally speaking, the resident nature of those fish is going to be something where if I'm using scope or active target, I'm obviously going to base it off of that fish's posture in the water, meaning, is he perfectly motionless? Is he, related to the structure, meaning not necessarily is he on it, but is he motionless near it? Meaning like a floating dock, there's a lot of times where there'll be residential 20 feet off the dock, but they relate to that dock. Not necessarily are they under it, but they're related to it. If I'm not using scope, my main way of determining whether a fish is a resident is going to be, I'm going to make, in my mind, I'm going to try and keep track just as I go along of how many casts I make that are related to a specific target for a specific reason, meaning a dock or a brush pile or intentionally going fishing laydowns, whatever it may be, and how many casts I make in between that fill those gaps, and just math it out. And I'm going to make an assumption based on my casts, if that a higher percentage of my casts that I make is at least double that of what I catch in between, meaning if I'm catching at least double off of targets or a specific type of cast that I'm catching in between, that they're primarily residential. Just being more is not enough to convince me that they're residential, because I'm making those casts for a reason. They're logical casts to be made. And in between is not a pattern. Targets are a pattern or an approach. In between is just water. That's just water. That's not an approach. So it has to be at least double mathematically for me to trust that it's actually a pattern or a consistent reproducible thing of what I'm catching in between. Because if it's not at least double, that's when I start assuming that I'm just around a productive area and that it's not necessarily as much about what I'm fishing. Because if I fish the right thing in a productive area, it's going to be at least double, if not triple, quadruple the number of fish I catch in between. So, but it's something where, dude, I do a lot of really consistent and intense mental math all day long, because numbers and occurrences is just how we make sense of what is the truth out of what we're doing. So keeping track of that is kind of a way to keep my feelings out of it and keep myself from preconceiving a notion that may or may not be true, just trying to force it on them. Math is my way to stay out of that. And so that's why I keep such intricate detail in it.
Is, from what I've noticed, something that's become very important in bass fishing over the last several years, like being the most efficient person you can while you're out on the water.
Yeah, 100%. Efficiency on the water is extraordinarily important, because, wasted time is something that you have to generate wasted time back by being better with your decision. So if I'm great with my decision making, but I'm poor with my efficiency in terms of decision making, in terms of how fast I make an adjustment, or what I do in terms of rigging my boat, preparing myself for a day on the water, preparing all my tackle in advance. If I make poor decisions related to that, but I make great decisions in terms of, where I go and how I fish it, that's going to take that great decision and make it a good decision, because I'm now nerfing my decision by going out and being poor with my preparation and costing myself fishing time. And the other part of it is that a good decision made backed up by significant efficiency in preparation and in rapid decision making and rapid adjustment making. A good decision can be boosted to a great decision by crossing your T's and dotting your I's in a way that your competitors aren't. Because that's a simple thing to control. Figuring out the fishery and figuring out what the bass want in it is the hardest part of the equation. The easiest part of the equation to control is yourself, your equipment, and how focused you are on trying to figure it out. If you can stay extremely focused all day on the water, every time you go out there, your tackle's all organized, prepared, and you've got it all rigged up, the way that you need to be for that tournament day or that practice day, and you go out with a plan in mind where you can go, run a few different types of this, a few different types of that, a few different types of this in some different areas of the lake quickly, by not wasting time sitting down and eating snacks 4 times. Not saying you shouldn't eat, but sitting down and just eating snacks for 20 minutes or scrolling through Instagram Reels, what have you. All those different inefficiencies make it where your time that you do get around them. It takes longer to get around them generally, and you have less time to fish for them by the time you get to that point. And so, you know, if you don't have your tackle squared away, you lose 2 of them right off the get-go because you either got rusty hooks or you got line that's in bad shape, and you break them off or lose them. And that's a couple opportunities that now I have to go recreate. So if I'm really on them, it might take me 15 minutes to create an opportunity. But guess what? Now I have to have an extra 30 minutes to make up for my, you know, my fudgery prior by not being prepared. So, you know, efficiency on the water is super huge because it's the little details that matter in terms of being prepared and making good, like, quick adjustments on the water when you need to. Because when you make a good decision, you're going to know it. It doesn't take long. You know, the fish are going to tell you, but being efficient is the only way to get there. Because if you're not efficient and you're wasteful with your time, you're wasteful with your decisions, you're either you're not going to get there, or you're going to end up arriving at destination on them a lot later than everyone else. And that's something that's just, you can't come back from without a little bit of luck. And I would rather my success on the water be based on skill and decision making and critical thinking than be based on luck, because I can control all of those. I can't control good fortune. That's just something that happenstances upon you. So that's my take on efficiency on the water. Everything you can control it, and stay focused the entire time. If you're not going to be focused out there, you're not going to make decisions eagerly trying to get on the deal the whole time, you're wasting your time, because someone out there is, and you're going to get beat. You need tackle related questions. Yeah.
So say, like, what do you do if it's like the lake you're fishing is just mud flats?
Mud flats?
Just mud flats.
Is this a specific lake you're talking about in your mind?
I know a lot of Wapapella is mud flat, but
Wapapella, that's what I've known to. So mud flats, so generally with mud, one thing I won't do on a lake that's got mud is fish a bait that's directly on the bottom. I'm fine with fishing near it. I don't want to be directly on it, meaning my solution is going to be a bait that's got a lot of lift and falls kind of slowly when you like a big worm, you lift it up and it takes a second to get back to the bottom. Carolina rig with mono or something that allows that bait to float up, or floating bait. Drop shot, something that keeps a wacky worm, something that keeps the bait above the bottom, even if it's near it, above it. Is the water clarity poor too?
It's terrible.
Oh, the water clarity sucks. Okay. Be very target oriented. Assume they're going to be very residential in terms of where they live. They're going to want to have a home base, because in very dirty water, it's just hard for them to navigate their environment without having a place to chill out for long periods of time. So focus on targets almost exclusively. And I will say they're going to be pretty easy to catch. Generally speaking, in dirty fisheries, they're easy to catch, they're very hard to find. And they're hard to get to engage with your bait because their radius of awareness is so small. So your main issue is probably going to be finding them. It's probably going to be creating a lot of opportunities. So I would lean a little bit more efficiency, meaning either be efficient with your bait selection, throwing something moving, or be efficient with your cast selection, being that we're talking about the residential concept of it. You can be efficient with your cast selection without having to throw a moving bait. You know, you can pick up, me and Gabe talked about this on his podcast the other day. You can be efficient with your bait selection if you know where they live. Even if it's dirty water and it's hard for them to find your bait, and there's poor population, if you know what kind of stuff they want to live around, whether that be a stump, a lay down, a rock corner, whatever that is, you can be efficient while still throwing something like a drop shot or a shaky head or a jig by only focusing on those high percentage casts and just making as many of those in a day as you can, because they are going to be very home bodies. You know, they're not going to do a lot of just swimming around. They're going to live on something. Yes, sir.
If you're just having like a terrible day on the water, just on the struggle bus, how are you keeping a positive mindset to just keep fishing? Or you don't even have bad days?
Catching them is fun. That's kind of what I remind myself, that catching them is fun, and that somewhere out there probably somebody's catching them better than I am, at least. And if somebody's catching them better than I am, they're having more fun than I am. So there's more fun to be had. I'm gonna be honest though, dog, it's tough. It's tough. There's a lot of days where I'm just out there like gritting my teeth saying catching them's fun. Catching them's fun. Somewhere out here somebody's caught a fish. Gosh, bro, I just freaking hate this place, but catching them's fun. I'm not saying you're not allowed to hate a lake. You're absolutely allowed to hate a lake. I've got a couple that I despise. But when I'm there, I'm gonna make the best decisions I can make on the water at that time. And if I can keep my dislike for that lake separated from how I'm actually fishing, meaning the mechanics of my decision making and my approach. As long as I'm making the best decisions I can and trusting that somewhere out there there's a better option than what I'm doing at that time, I can hate the lake all I want. As long as I know the fact of there's something better to be had, I can stay focused on that. Do you have a least favorite lake?
A least favorite lake? I mean, no, not really. There's not a lake I hate.
I was hoping for a hot take.
Everyone says Palmy in Missouri, but
I've heard that one sucks outside the winter.
I hate
Wait.
Clearwater.
Do what?
Clearwater.
I'll be honest, dog. Some of my favorite fisheries have clean water, but they're often harder to catch in clean water than they are in dirty.
No, that's the lake name. Clearwater.
Clearwater's the lake name? Does
Yeah.
that have clear water?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Where is that?
Piedmont area.
Don't know what that means.
I have a property down there, so it's on the highway.
Gotcha. Mine's Lake Dardanelle. Don't like that place, never have, not gonna. Not gonna. Ohio River's pretty high up there, except I don't consider it a real fishery. So if it was a real fishery, I would call it that my least favorite. But yeah, so any other questions?
Do you ever fish rivers?
I do, yeah. Yep. It just depends. I mean, there's all sorts of rivers. Most of them are going to trend shallower and more off-colored. But I fish a lot of rivers. I've spent time on the Mississippi River, a little bit of time on the Ohio River, a little bit of time on the true Tennessee River, not the lakes, but the river itself. And been up on the St. Lawrence River, Detroit River, some of the cleaner, deeper rivers. But I've spent a lot of time fishing rivers, yeah.
You often ever go for any other fish and bass?
When I do, it's saltwater, generally. I don't often fish for freshwater fish other than bass. Not that I'm mad if I catch a big striper or walleye or something. And I can get behind some crappie fishing, but I don't do it very often. I will get behind some saltwater fishing, though. Don't get me started on that, because I will go. That stuff is fun.
What do you fish for? It's so fun.
Oh, man, you're getting me started on that.
Like fish and snook.
Inshore fish, redfish, snook, trout. Never caught a tarpon. Never landed one, but that would be
Sheepshead?
Sheepshead are cool. They're very cool fish. I've caught some. Yep. I've caught a couple on a hair jig. They're fun to catch. They're just hard to catch on artificials. Like, I'm a big artificials guy with saltwater fish.
5 minutes remaining in the sixth session. 5 minutes remaining in the sixth session. Thank you.
So, how many of you guys are fishing tournaments next year? A good handful of you. What lakes do you guys fish on for tournaments? Bull Shoals.
Ozarks, Table Rock.
Ozarks, Table Rock.
Stockton.
Stockton.
Truman.
Truman. I apologize.
I like Truman.
It's all right. It's not Table Rock or Ozarks or Bull Shoals, but it's all right. Any questions you guys have about tournaments this year? I've spent some time on most of those things.
What do you do if like you can't really find any brush piles at a lake? It's just like
So if I'm trying to find brush, I'm generally going, if I'm really struggling to find it, the two best places to find brush on any lake are going to be like, first off, you're trying to figure out whether you're trying to find brush that's been dumped by people or existing wood in a lake. If you're trying to find existing wood in a lake, the best places to look are going to be creek channels that trend a little shallower. Back in backs of creeks and pockets, back third of them, there's generally going to be some stumps or brush around those channels. And then if you're trying to find man-made brush, very obvious flats, edges of very obvious big flats in a lake, ends of points, places that you assume crappie fishermen or bass fishermen have gone out and dumped brush. With brush, if you're trying to find it fast, I would go to the most obvious contours that you can find in the lake. Stuff where you're like, there's got to be somebody that's fished there before. And that's generally where you're going to find a lot of your brush. Your sneakier brush is going to be on flatter places, generally a little bit less obvious, like round, gravel,
I
flatbed
think those
places.
are like the good ones to find.
Those are generally the best ones. But I mean, any tournament that I brush fish, there's going to be at least a third of my fish that I weigh that week, most of the time, that's going to be caught off community hole-looking brush. I'm talking like even government brush, where there's a buoy sitting on top. Like, that stuff can still be really good. It's just, you don't want to lean on it as much. But if you're trying to get in touch with it really quick, I would start on obvious stuff. Start on obvious big flats or main lake points or back thirds of creeks right around a creek channel.
Oh, what's like the landscaping underwater in Bull Shoals? Never fished it.
So Bull Shoal is pretty steep, very rocky. At times very clear. It's pretty Table Rock-esque in terms of steepness. You're working with a lot of ditches, a lot of really steep swings and things like that. You're not working with a lot of flat stuff down, at least bottom into the lake. It's similar to Table Rock if you got rid of a lot of the docks and some of the timber and stuff. But think Table Rock. It fishes in a comparable way. The main difference with the Bull Shoals is they tend to be a little bit more transitory and a little bit less residential because they have less of that, floating dock timber element of it. And a lot of times they'll just kind of move in, move out because it's just rock and empty water. So I'd stay around bait. That's a big thing there. If you're around shad, when I say bait, I'm not meaning like swim down and look for crawfish or oh look there's some bluegill. Shad. Stay around shad. Drive on 2D until you find shad. And once you do, I don't care if you're not even fishing fish on bait. If you're just fishing the bank or fishing the pocket, stay around the shad. That's where the majority of your population is going to be.
Okay. And then what do you do when like you're fishing a lake and it's flooded? You got rain
Flooded?
and all that.
That's when I'm going to focus on cover that is consistent regardless of water level. So meaning I'm going to look for standing targets where they can move up and down it regardless of how the water fluctuates or changes. Meaning if it's a target, I'm going to look for a piece of timber standing probably generally pretty close to the bank in shallower water. A dock float, because regardless of how deep or shallow the bottom gets, dock float's always at the surface. It's always at the surface. And if you're not talking about a piece of cover like a bluff wall, something steep where they can slide up, move down, seawalls the same manner. Most of those things, my only reason I emphasize those is because generally heavily rising water or very flooded water is accompanied by off-colored water. And so you want to stay around some sort of target. Some sort of target that's going to be in the water at significantly lower water level and at significantly higher.
Thank you.
No doubt.
Appreciate it.
You guys have a great week. Hope you had a good day. Yeah. And a Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Ah.
Oh, no. How'd it go, man?
That went great.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.